Hello everyone. Oops. Okay, it's a great pleasure for us from the Swedish tax agencies to have the possibility to attend this conference. And thank you to KTA for making this possible. And we are happy to share the knowledge about the transformation that we have made in the Swedish tax agency. And if it's so that you have any questions or reflections during my presentation, please feel free to ask them. I will be more than happy to explain more what I'm talking about if it's something I say is confusing in a sense. And when we talk about the Swedish tax agency, Ms. Elinor here made a presentation. I think you wrapped it up very good. What is important from taxpayers. But that has not been the case if we go back in time. As you described, your relatives, they were not very happy with the relationship with the Swedish tax agency. Some were very stressed, and to be truthful, we were not that nice towards the taxpayers. And nowadays, we have a high level of trust, and I'm going to give you a presentation where I describe how we worked and why we worked towards a high trustful relationship with the taxpayers. If you look in the Swedish society, this graph shows the different level of trust when it comes to different agencies. And even if we are the public sector, you feel as a citizen that you have a relationship with each and one of the different agencies. So you feel that you have one relationship with the police, one with the tax agency, and so on. And we have a very high level of trust, and some agencies have a very low level of trust. And the reason, as we see, is not the mission. It's not that we have different missions. It's more about how we carry out our missions that judge the trust for different institutions as we see it. And the change has, if you look at this graph, you will see that the change is shown very drastically between the beginning of 2000 compared to 2017. We had a level of trust about 45–50% in the beginning of 2000, and now it's 75% of the taxpayers that say that they trust the Swedish tax agencies. And the treatment has also changed a lot, the perceived treatment from us, where in the past approximately 45–50% said that they perceived a good treatment from us, but now the 95% of the citizens perceive a good treatment. So it's a drastic change. Then it comes about combat tax evasion. Some say that, oh, you go for this soft approach, so what about the tax evasion? Well, building trust is important when it comes to the willingness to comply that Ms. Elinor explained. If you trust us, you can see that trust affects both the willingness to be compliant, but also the possibilities to have an early interaction with us, so we can sort out tax issues very early on. But when it comes to combating tax evasion, people tend to think that we're becoming better and better with this trustful approach. And it is very important that the way we use our power as a tax agency, we do enforcement, is something that we do, but you can do it in a way that increases trust. And what about people's opinion about would I hide income if I had the possibility? Here perhaps we see the most drastic change. From beginning of 2000, 30% approximately said that, well, I could do that, but now we're down to about 5%. It's not only the way that the tax agency has worked that affect these results, it's also discussion in society about norms, change of legislation. But we are very happy that the tendency is going this way. So now let me give you a wrap-up description about this transformation. Some say, okay, you're a modern agency, you have a high level of trust, what have you done? Have you brought in some super consultants that twisted the minds of the people working in the Swedish tax agency, so now we work with another way? Or did we use these management models and work with them, and the change happened? This is not the way we have worked. What we have done is listening to taxpayers, trying to understand how it is to be a taxpayer in society, and we have brought this knowledge in and used it in a way to set our goals and to drive our change. And when did this journey start? Usually we go back to the 1970s when we start talking about this journey, because at that time the situation for many taxpayers was, as Ms. Eleanor described, we were very heavily focused on enforcement. We tried to scare people into compliance. We said that you should be aware, otherwise we will catch you and things can go bad for you. So people were afraid of us. And a good result at that time was seen as when we find a lot of mistakes, when we looked into the tax return filed by taxpayers, because you did something wrong here. And we made many corrections, and we could gain extra money from audit activities and enforcement activities. The more money we collected, the better we thought it was. But the relationship with taxpayers was we against the taxpayers and the taxpayers against us. In the 80s, we started to talk about service, but service beside of this strong identity of being this enforcement agency. Service could be good as well, but we had a tension between the staff working with service and the staff working with enforcement, that the enforcement people were seen as the heroes more than the service people. And in the 90s, we saw that service activities and enforcement activities came a little bit closer together. We had ideas to strike a balance between the resources we spent on service and the resources we spent on enforcement. But we saw service and enforcement two different things. I want to share with you an example. We had an activity where we wanted to see that those taxpayers who owned a house, that they declared this income in the tax return. And the taxpayers, they could read in the newspaper before filing that we were about to do this activity. But what happened? In this island called Gotland in Sweden, where we had this activity, the taxpayers, they came to our office and said, okay, I understand you will do this enforcement activity, you will see that people declare. But what if I want to declare? Can you please aid me? Can you assist me? Can you show me how to do it right? That increased the demand for service. So we had from the head office to send more information, more brochures, more assistance to this office. But at the same time, we realized that we can't see enforcement and service as two different things. From the taxpayer's point of view, it's a relation with the tax agency where we do different things, so they are interlinked. But still in the 90s, the heroes of our organization were those who could collect much money after audit activities and so on. But then, in the beginning of 2000, we started to rethink what are we really doing? What is really a good result for us? And we came to the conclusion that if we can get it right from the start, instead of finding as much errors as possible, that is a better result for us. And when we decided upon this strategy to get it right from the start, we also wanted to know the drivers for compliance, not only talking about non-compliance, why people are non-compliant. Why are people compliant? Why do you comply? Strong driver is the trust that the taxpayers perceive from us, if it's easy to comply. And also, you can see that social norms in society, you tend to do what others do. So if you feel that others are compliant, maybe I will adopt this non-compliant behavior. So we had to change our view, our mindset from back in the 70s. We saw people as like Homo economicus, you know, people are just calculating and base their decisions on that, to more Homo sapiens, that we are like people are most. We do, if it's simple enough, we'll do it that way. If it's complicated, maybe you won't use your rights because it's complicated. And so this drastic shift was within our mission. We have a mission to secure the financing of the public sector, to contribute to the well-functioning of society, and to counteract crime. But the way we looked how to carry out, we changed that drastically. And this right from the start approach made us do lots of studies in order to understand, as I said, how it is to run a company, to carry out a business. And each and every one of these studies that we have committed, we realize that we have been wrong ourselves. So we can have a lot of knowledge how it is within the tax agency. But to understand how it is to be a taxi driver, we have to listen to the taxi drivers. And I'm going to share with you some results from studies that have helped us during this change. And 2010 and beyond, the possibilities to use digitalization has become better and better. So what we have done is we tried to make it easy by computerizing processes more from our point of view, but still to make it easier for taxpayers. We have changed this strategy now, but it has helped a lot, make life easier for taxpayers. During this journey, during this change, we have also made mistakes. But we could see that we tend to be afraid talking about what has not been a success. But we think that we can learn so much of it, and we can see huge differences that when we have listened and understand taxpayers and when we haven't. Let me share with you two examples. In 20 years ago, something like that, we developed a service where companies could file to us income tax statement. They are obliged to do it. And because by cooperating with software developers, it was very easy for the companies to use their software that they use in the company just to send us this information. Over 99% of the taxpayers obliged to do it voluntarily used the e-filing way of doing it. And we didn't have to force them to do it because they thought it is good for me. But then 15 years ago, we developed another e-service. It was about filing VAT and social contributions. But we hadn't listened to taxpayers when we developed that service. So the taxpayers, they were supposed to go to our website, and they were supposed to fill in information more or less like you do manually on a tax return. Only 4% use this e-service. And from the tax agency we said, well, don't the companies know about this new e-service? Maybe we have to tell them that they could use this. But that was not the problem. The problem was that they said, well, this is not good for me. I have everything in my computer system I use for my company, and you at the tax agency, you want me to spend time sitting in front of a computer and type it in all again. So why should I do that? So even if we used technology to develop something, it was not good in reality. And we can see a huge difference between the first case where we had listened and understood and it's good for real, and the second case where we didn't listen. So we think to bring in taxpayers' perspective in everything we do is a win-win situation. Oh. So now let me share with you an example of a study that had really boosted the change for us. It was in 2003. At that time, we knew that trust for us was crucial, but we didn't know how trust was affected by our way of doing our activities. So we said to a specialized company these issues to do this study for us, and it was carried out with 84 in-depth interviews with psychologists and behavioral experts. And we divided taxpayers into different groups. So we had young taxpayer in one group and older taxpayer and tax agents and so different groups. And when all these interviews were done, we had a meeting with this organization that made this study. And they said that how we divided taxpayers into different groups, it didn't match the attitudes. It was as much difference between the groups as among the groups. So we started thinking ourselves, why did we divide people into these different groups? And we didn't have any knowledge about it, but when we got the result, we realized that it's very easy to have like stereotypes or pre-assumption that affects us in the way we divide taxpayer. So just to give you one example, one businessman for a mid-sized company said that, well, in the relation with the tax agency, I feel like I'm going back to school. You have to go into the headmaster's office. I get this, feeling in the stomach, I've done something wrong. And he was very insecure. But the mindset of us, our officers, was that we're meeting this businessman, so we should act in a certain way, but we hadn't listened. And sometimes when we write letters to lawyers, for example, we tend to see that, oh, we're writing a letter to a lawyer, so therefore we should use this language, etc. But had we listened to lawyers? Had we listened how they really wanted the communication from us? No, we hadn't. It was just stereotypes that made us think that this was the right way. The result from this study was that taxpayers perceive 3 different attitudes. And each and every one of these attitudes is within the legislation. So it's no doubt that we follow the law, but people perceive that we do it in different manners. We label these attitudes A, B, and C. Means nothing, it's no grades or something, just neutral labels. But the first attitude you see on this picture is an attitude characterized by us being very superior, arrogant, and the taxpayer feel like you're judged beforehand. And the feelings or the reaction when we are perceived using this attitude is they could take 2 different directions. One direction is that people want to get away from this meeting as fast as possible. You stop listening. And we have seen in other studies people describing this attitude to say that, well, I perceived this attitude 15 years ago, and since then I've never contacted the Swedish tax agency because I will never put myself in a situation characterized by this attitude. That is one reaction. The other reaction is that people get angry with us. So that this is not okay, you can't treat me this way. I will write a letter to the Director General, I will go to the newspapers, or I will go to court. But when you go to court, the driver is not the tax case. The driver is more the attitude that taxpayers perceived from us, that they said that, well, this gave me all this energy to take my case up to the highest court. Oh, sorry about that. Like there. Another attitude was an attitude we labeled C, or B. Sorry. An attitude not as arrogant or accusive as the first attitude I talked about, but an attitude where people don't perceive the human driver of the willingness to be compliant. They think that we use a complicated language, that we were very squared. They don't think that they are seen as human beings, that we see them more like the tax case. And what happens when taxpayers don't understand, which happens a lot of course, is that they judge themselves. They say that the tax agency, they're probably perfect. It's me that I don't understand. So you hang up the phone when you ask the officer, not because you understood, more that, okay, but we can't take it further. And then you think that, I'm lucky because I have a colleague who knows about taxes. So I will give Lennart a call and maybe we can solve it that way instead. So people find other ways of solving their tax issues, even if we are obliged as an agency to provide good service. So the reaction from this attitude is that people get insecure. They don't really feel that they get the help or assistance needed because of this very inward-looking attitude. Like that. And the last attitude was an attitude we labeled C. And this attitude is characterized by us being helpful, empathic, forward-looking, and cooperative. And you don't feel judged beforehand. You feel as a taxpayer that we follow the law, but at the same time listen and understand the needs of the individual. And when taxpayers perceive this attitude from us, they feel relaxed. They feel that they can ask us so we can sort things out. And they say that they are more than happy to come back if it occurs another situation, if we tend to have this attitude. And when it comes to the hierarchy, some say that, oh, I'm meeting the tax agent, and could be perceived by some by a higher hierarchy. But when we meet with this attitude, it feels like we meet on common terms, but we have different roles. The effect of this attitude is not only that people are relaxed and encouraged to ask questions, it's also that they view the tax officers as human beings carrying out an important job for the government. So it's we seeing them as human beings, and they also see us as human beings. Very positive attitude. And when it comes to the effect on trust, it's only the last attitude, the C attitude, that has a positive impact on trust. The B attitude have a negative impact, and the first attitude, the A attitude, have a very strong negative impact. And the negative impact of the first attitude is much stronger than the positive impact of the last attitude. So we realized in 2003, if we're going to build trust, we have to do the right things, but also in the right way. And this was the right way when it comes to building trust. So, based on this study, we decided upon a value in 2006. One of our values is being helpful. And if we hadn't listened to taxpayers, we're pretty sure that we would never come up with helpful as a value, because we didn't talk about being helpful within the tax agency at that time. We talked about everything should be correct according to the law, we should be efficient and so on. But from taxpayers' point of view, they said it's crucial that you are helpful, that you can assist me and explain to me so I understand. We changed the way we recruit our staff. We say that it's not enough that you have a degree in tax law. You also have to have the possibility to explain to a person who knew nothing about taxes, so he and she understands and feel comfortable about it. And we set goals for taxpayer relations in 2006. Before that, we didn't have any goals. People should perceive just and fair treatment from us. So, being in the world of tax administration, we tend to think that if we did not enforce, nothing would work. But this is an example that we think is very important for us to reconsider. In Sweden, I don't know how it is in the Korean, South Korean context, but in Sweden we have like you can have ice cream, but no people there. You just put money in the box. So you can look at the list, this is the price of the ice cream, and you put the money in the box. And if you go on the countryside, you can find vegetables, just a list and a box and vegetables. So we think, can these systems work? Or do people just take the money? When most of the cases, these systems work, because in general people are honest and they want to be compliant. And when we talk to these companies that have this kind of way of doing business, they say that before salary could be a little bit lack of money, but it compensates after salary. So it works also as a bank. And we think that we have to understand that the norms are that people want to be fair and just, And by understanding that, we can contribute to the willingness instead of just forcing people into compliance. So what it comes down to is how we carry out what we do. And we see, as Ms. Eleanor explained, that if people perceive just and fair treatment, they will accept decisions from us, even if it means paying more tax. So for taxpayers, it's very tough to know, was this decision right according to the law? Because you don't have the knowledge. But what you can judge is the treatment you perceive from the tax agency. It's called procedural justice or procedural fairness. And in the past, we only focus on the law. We said, was it right according to the law? Then we have done a good job. Was it not according to the law? We said that we have to do it another way. But by talking about this attitude, by understanding from taxpayers' point of view, we can make sure that the experience from the taxpayer should be this just and fair treatment. And then it's about the language we use, if it's too complicated or if it's understandable, if you feel listened to, if you perceive a good attitude, a good treatment during the whole process. So our reality is that we make most decisions that we make is about people paying more tax. That's the reality. But when you go back in the past, maybe we didn't do it with the same attitude, and you feel that we accuse them and they felt like the tax agency sees me as a bad individual. But now we see a difference between the tax case and the taxpayer. So the taxpayer should always perceive a good attitude. So these attitudes I showed you, we say that it should never be part of the punishment when you do something wrong. So even if we do a tax crime investigation, we do it with a C attitude. So if someone is convicted for tax crimes, we say to these taxpayers, if you want us to explain the decision or you want assistance, how you can take your case to court, please feel free to contact us. And from our constitution, it's very important for us to see that we treat each and everyone as individuals, and that we do not do differences due to, for example, gender, color, nation, ethics. It doesn't matter if you're a famous person or not. You should feel that in the eyes of the tax agency, you're treated equally. And this affects the way we select taxpayers for our audit activities. We say that we should never use some of these discrimination typics for our selection, even if it shows statistically that younger men, for example, tend to take more risks. So this is about the core of use of our power, that you feel that you're treated the same no matter who you are. So for example, when we talk about people who cheat with taxes, we don't say that they are tax cheaters, like a characteristic of what you are. It's more that you are a businessman, but perhaps you cheated with taxes. And it's a huge difference if we tend to characterize what you do as who you are. So in order to see that we do this correctly, we also do studies to see, are there any differences of how we meet people or how we use our power based on this. So, and we bring this knowledge in because the norms affect us as an agency, and we bring this knowledge in order to improve all the time. And I can also add that in our society, most information from agencies, it's public information. So for journalists, they can access every decision that we make. It's public information. And if they want to have telephone calls or something made by our high executives, it's also public information. And we cannot ask why they were going to have this information. It's being transparent is core of our system. We think it's very good, that people have this possibility to access this. So, how have we worked with transformation? Well, as I said, we have collected new knowledge by listening in different ways to taxpayers, and this, together with our mission, has created new insights for us, how we could strengthen the relation, how we can avoid doing these mistakes that ends up that will not create some benefits for no one. And the changed attitudes, it's not the attitudes of the taxpayers, it's our attitude at the tax agency. By bringing this knowledge, we have changed our mindset, say that, well, it's not easy for taxpayers, so therefore we have to understand that. So change to a more humble attitude, and that has affected the taxpayer's view of us. And then we have changed the way we work. And some key factors for our transformation. This has been continuing under a long time, so it's been persistence and consistency under a long time. I mean, the reaction from our staff when we started to talk about attitudes, not everyone were happy about that. Some say that, well, what is this? I'm not hired to, have some friendly attitude. I'm hired here to see that it's okay according to the law. Some of the staff said, oh, finally we're talking about how we carry out what we do. This is also important. But to be truthful, first years, some staff said, well, just wait a little time and we'll go back to normal. No. But being persistent from the highest level of our commissioner and through the communication within the tax agency, changing the communication to mass media, etc., carrying out this persistence has been a very important factor. And also, even if we have brought in knowledge from the outside, we think that you have to own your change yourself. So for us it has been very, very important. Think about those who carried out this attitude study. If they had talked to our auditors, for example, say that you should have a better attitude, we're not sure that they had thought that this is a good idea, because we think that the auditors would have said that they don't know anything about audit, so how can they tell us about our attitude? To take help from the outside, but drive the change yourself, that has been working for us. And not using these tools. There are lots of tools on the market, and we have experienced that these tools tend in our agency at certain state take over the overall thinking of what you're going to use these tools or models for. So therefore we understand that these tools could be good, used in a good way, but if you're going to plan your business, it's about planning your business. That is the core thing. And no detailed instruction. We try to bring our staff on board by lots of reflection and discussion and understanding. So if you understand why trust is important, we could see that it's easier to get people on board. It's easier when we do audits and so that you do it according to this C attitude, if you have the possibility to reflect amongst your colleagues why this is important. And not having it as a project. This has been our core business. This has been our ordinary managers who have managed this. So things that we do that tend to be part of the ordinary business tend to, not being such as important that compared to the core business. So being part of the normal business operation has also been something that has been important for us during this change. But this beautiful vision, a society where everyone is willing to do their fair share, that we decided upon in 1998, now we have changed it. And it's not because it has been good. It has been very good for us. But you saw at the start of my presentation, we have a high level of trust and so on. And we see that if we relax, we tend to just say that everything is good, we're a good agency. We think that is the beginning of not being so good anymore. So we have decided upon a new vision which says, together we make society possible. The willingness is still very important, it's part of our strategy, but we see that we want to have a more cooperative approach with the business sector and the society as a whole. Even if we are the only tax agency in the country, we're just a player among other players to get the environment for taxpayer to be as easy as possible, to as trustful as possible. So we want to emphasize more on that. So these are parts of our new strategy, that we create social benefit together with others. And we want to be a good example, of course, but also to have the same view as taxpayers have. And the taxpayers, they are in a borderless environment, so we have to have the same mindset. Trust, still important. We increase trust in our agency and the willingness to contribute. And then we conduct legitimate and credible enforcement that strengthens norms. We see the purpose of enforcement is not to rectify people who have done wrong, it's to strengthen norms. And Lennart is going to talk more about that, but we could see that most taxpayers, they are willing to comply if you see that others are compliant. And they want us to see that others are compliant. So instead of, when we write to taxpayer, we say that you should be aware, as I said back in the 70s. We could say that you should feel that we are doing something for your line of business, so you do not face unfair competition by others who are not compliant. And that is crucial if taxpayers feel that we are doing something for them, for society, or against everyone. And here, the mass media relation and how when we get the question, why are you doing this activity, what if we answer that we're just hunting taxpayers, or if we do something for the greater good, it's drastic effect. It's really important. And then that we act for enabler for everyone is that we see how can we not building our own e-services, but instead open up, for example, so others can build solutions in the computerized system that companies use or in the environment that private taxpayers use. So maybe you want to know about taxes when you access the bank and you want to pay your bills, and we see, can we make this possible? And then the last one, that we are a courageous organization in constant development. Sometimes, as I said, we are afraid of things going wrong. So therefore we think that we have to address this, we have to have the courage to test new ideas, and we want to have a management style where we have the basic assumption that everyone wants to do a good job. So instead of using detailed instructions, we have to use our management resources in a way that you feel that it's nice to go to work on Monday morning and we contribute to the greater good together. So now it's 2 o'clock and I promised to keep time, and I just want to end by saying Kamsa Hamida.